I watched my sister's manicured hand slide the forged documents across the mahogany desk, her smile sharp as broken glass. She'd been back from her business trip for exactly 3 days, and she'd already managed to convince our dying grandmother to change her will. "It's done," Victoria said, her voice dripping with satisfaction as the lawyer notarized the papers. "Everything goes to me. The house, the stocks, the trust fund, all of it." I stood in the doorway of Grandmother Chen's study, invisible as always. They hadn't even noticed me arrive. But something was different about Victoria. She moved with an eerie confidence, her eyes calculating in a way they'd never been before. She kept glancing at me with this strange mixture of pity and triumph, as if she knew something I didn't. "What about Elena?" Our grandmother wheezed from her wheelchair, her voice barely audible. Victoria's laugh was cold. "Elena doesn't need it. She never finishes anything anyway. Remember how she dropped out of college? How she failed at every job? She'll just waste it." She leaned in close to our grandmother, her voice honey-sweet and poisonous. "Besides, you know she was always planning to contest the original will. I overheard her on the phone last week, talking to lawyers about declaring you mentally incompetent." My blood ran cold. I'd never said anything like that. Never even thought it. But Grandmother Chen's roomy eyes found mine, and for the first time in my life I saw doubt there. Doubt and disappointment. "Is this true, Elena?" "No, Grandmother, I would never—" "She's lying," Victoria interrupted smoothly. "She's always been jealous of me. Ever since we were children, she's tried to sabotage everything I worked for." I felt my world tilting. This wasn't how Victoria usually operated. My sister had always been cruel, yes, but in subtle ways, backhanded compliments, strategic exclusion from family events. But this was bold, calculated, like she knew exactly what buttons to push and when. Like she'd done this before. That's when I noticed it. The way she kept touching her temple as if remembering something. The way she'd flinched when she first saw me this morning, just for a split second, as if surprised I was still here. The way she'd asked Father, oh so casually at breakfast, whether I was still working at that little shop downtown with an emphasis that suggested she'd expected a different answer. The pieces clicked together in my mind like a lock opening. Victoria had been reborn. Somehow, impossibly, my sister had lived through this before and come back to do it differently. That's why she'd been so confident, so strategic. She knew the future, or at least she thought she did. She knew our grandmother would die in 2 weeks. She knew about the inheritance, and she'd come back to make sure she got everything. In her past life, I must have received the inheritance, and she'd returned to change that. The lawyer cleared his throat. "If there are no objections, I'll file these papers tomorrow morning. Mrs. Chen, are you certain this is your wish?" I watched my grandmother's weathered hand tremble as she reached for the pen to sign the final document. 23 years of being the overlooked granddaughter, the disappointment, the one who could never measure up to perfect Victoria, all culminated in this moment. "Wait," I said quietly. Victoria's head snapped toward me, her eyes gleaming with something almost like fear. "Elena, don't make this harder than it needs to be. You know grandmother's made her decision." "I'm not contesting it," I said, and I watched the relief flood my sister's face. She thought she'd won. She thought she'd successfully rewritten history. I just wanted to say goodbye to grandmother properly, since apparently I'm not welcome in this family anymore. I walked over to my grandmother's wheelchair and bent down, pressing a kiss to her papery cheek. She smelled like lavender and old books, the same as she had when I was a child, and she was the only one who'd read me bedtime stories. "I love you, grandmother," I whispered. "I always have. I'm sorry I disappointed you." Her hand caught mine, surprising strength in those frail fingers. "Elena, it's okay," I said, straightening up. I looked at Victoria, at her triumphant smile, at the way she'd already positioned herself in grandmother's favorite chair like a queen on a throne. "I hope you enjoy the inheritance, sister. You've certainly earned it." The words tasted bitter, but I meant them differently than she thought. because Victoria didn't know everything about this timeline. She didn't know that 6 months ago, on a rain-soaked evening when I'd been at my absolute lowest point, I'd received a phone call that changed everything. She didn't know that I'd already been adopted. 6 months earlier, I'd been working the closing shift at Chen's Antiques, a bitter irony, sharing a surname with the grandmother who barely acknowledged my existence. The shop was a cramped space in the old district, filled with dust and forgotten treasures that nobody wanted, much like me. My phone had been disconnected for non-payment. My apartment was a studio the size of a closet, and I was 2 months behind on rent. I hadn't eaten anything but instant noodles in weeks. Victoria had just gotten engaged to Marcus Chen, the CEO of Chen Technologies. No relation to our family, just another wealthy Chen in a city full of them. The engagement party had been spectacular. I knew because I'd seen the photos on social media. I hadn't been invited. I was 25 years old, and I'd already accepted that I was a failure. The bell above the shop door chimed, and I looked up from the inventory I was pretending to organize. An elderly woman walked in, dressed in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my entire year's salary. She had steel gray hair pulled back in an elegant chignon and eyes that seemed to look straight through me. "We're about to close," I said automatically. "I'm not here to shop," the woman replied. Her voice was crisp, authoritative. "I'm here to talk to you, Elena Montgomery." My hands stilled on the porcelain vase I'd been cataloging. Nobody called me Montgomery anymore. I'd been using my mother's maiden name, Chen, ever since. "Who are you?" "My name is Catherine Montgomery," she said, "and I'm your paternal grandmother." The vase slipped from my fingers. I caught it just before it hit the floor, my heart hammering. "That's impossible," I whispered. "My father is dead. He died when I was 3. "Your father, James Montgomery, is very much alive," Catherine said calmly. "And he's been looking for you for 22 years. The room spun. I grabbed the edge of the counter to steady myself. "What?" Catherine moved closer, and I could see the family resemblance now. Something in the shape of her jaw, the set of her shoulders. "Your mother, Sophia Chen, told James you'd died in a car accident along with her parents. She showed him a death certificate. Funeral photos. He was devastated. He'd loved you so much, Elena. But Sophia wanted nothing to do with the Montgomery family after James broke off their relationship." "My mother died when I was 3, I said numbly. "Car accident. That's what I was always told." "Sophia died, yes," Catherine confirmed, "but before she did, she had a crisis of conscience. She sent James a letter confessing everything, telling him you were alive, that you'd been living with her family all this time. The letter took months to reach him. It had been lost in the mail system. By the time he got it and tracked you down, you were already 18 and living with the Chens. He wanted to contact you immediately, but I convinced him to wait, to investigate first, to make sure you were safe and well cared for." A laugh bubbled up in my throat, hysterical and bitter. "Safe and well cared for." Catherine's eyes softened. "We've been watching you, Elena. We know how they've treated you. The favoritism toward Victoria. The constant criticism. The way they've sabotaged every opportunity you've tried to pursue." I thought about the college fund that had mysteriously been empty when it came time for me to enroll, while Victoria had gotten a full ride to an elite university, paid for by Grandmother Chen. The job interviews where I'd been mysteriously rejected, only to later discover that someone had called ahead with concerns about my character. The boyfriend who'd broken up with me because Victoria had told him I was unstable. "Why didn't you contact me sooner?" I asked, my voice breaking. "We wanted to give the Chens a chance," Catherine said quietly. "Your father hoped that despite everything, they were still family. That they'd do right by you eventually. But we've been watching, and it's only gotten worse. So I'm here now with a proposition." She reached into her purse and pulled out a leather folder. "James Montgomery is the founder and chairman of Montgomery Global Industries. Perhaps you've heard of it?" I had. Everyone had. Montgomery Global was one of the largest conglomerates in the country, with interests in everything from technology to real estate to pharmaceuticals. They were worth billions. "He wants to meet you," Catherine continued. "He wants to be your father again, if you'll let him. And I want to give you the life you should have had all along. We'd like you to come live with us. We'll pay for you to finish your education, help you start a career, give you the support and love you've been denied. All you have to do is say yes." I stared at the papers in the folder. Adoption papers, financial documents showing trust funds, investment portfolios, property deeds. "But I'm 25, I said stupidly. "Isn't it too late for adoption?" "Adult adoption is perfectly legal," Catherine said. "And given the unusual circumstances of your case, it's the best way to legally establish your place in the family. You'd become Elena Montgomery again. You'd have full rights as James's daughter and my granddaughter." I thought about my crumbling studio apartment, my disconnected phone, the way Grandmother Chen had looked right through me at last year's New Year's dinner, the way Victoria had accidentally spilled red wine on my only nice dress at her graduation party. "Why would you want me?" I whispered. "You don't even know me." Catherine's expression softened. "We know you, Elena. We've been watching you for years. We've seen your kindness even when you had nothing to give. The way you helped that elderly customer find her husband's war medals. The time you gave your coat to a homeless woman in winter. The way you've endured years of cruelty without becoming cruel yourself. You're remarkable. And you're James's daughter. That's more than enough." Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't stop them. "When?" I managed to ask. "Now," Catherine said gently. "Tonight, if you are willing. We have a car waiting. You can pack whatever you want to bring, or we can provide everything new, whatever you prefer. But Elena, you need to understand something." She stepped closer, and her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "The Chens can never know. Not yet. If they discover you've come into money, into power, they'll try to manipulate you to get their hands on it. We've seen how they operate. So for now, this needs to be our secret. Can you do that? Can you continue your life as it is, at least on the surface, while we prepare for the right moment to reveal the truth?" I thought about Victoria's smug smile at her engagement party, about Grandmother Chen's disappointed sighs, about Father Chen's complete indifference to my existence. "Yes," I said, I can do that." The next 6 months had been a dream I was constantly afraid I'd wake up from. I'd moved into the Montgomery estate, a sprawling mansion in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. My room was bigger than my entire former apartment, with an ensuite bathroom that had heated floors and a shower with 6 different shower heads. But more than the luxury, what undid me was the warmth. My father, James Montgomery, was a tall man with graying hair and kind eyes that looked so much like mine. When I'd first met him, he'd pulled me into his arms and sobbed. "My little girl," he'd whispered into my hair. "I thought I'd lost you forever." We'd spent hours talking, getting to know each other. He told me about my mother, about their relationship, how they'd met in college, fallen deeply in love, but his family's expectations and her family's traditional views had torn them apart. He'd broken off the engagement to pursue his business dreams, and Sophia had retaliated by faking my death. "I should have fought harder," he said, his voice thick with regret. "I should have questioned it more, demanded to see you, but I was young and devastated, and I believed her. I've regretted it every day since." I'd started at Montgomery Global in an entry-level position, using my mother's maiden name so no one would make the connection. Catherine, Grandmother Catherine I'd learned to call her, had insisted I work my way up properly. "You'll inherit everything one day," she'd said, "but you need to earn the respect of your future employees. They need to see that you're capable, not just a spoiled heiress." So I worked hard. I poured everything into learning the business, into proving myself. And slowly, I began to discover that I was good at it. Without the constant weight of the Chen's disapproval, without Victoria's sabotage, I flourished. But I kept up appearances with the Chen family. I still lived in a small apartment they knew about, a much nicer one that my father secretly paid for, but modest enough not to raise suspicions. I still worked at the antique shop part-time, claiming I'd gotten a second job doing administrative work to explain any improvements in my circumstances. I endured Victoria's wedding to Marcus, watching from the back of the church in a dress I'd told her I'd bought at a thrift store but had actually been custom-made by a designer who owed my father a favor. I smiled through Grandmother Chen's birthday party, where I'd been seated at the children's table despite being 25, while Victoria held court as the guest of honor. And I waited. Catherine had taught me patience. "Revenge is a dish best served cold," she'd said with a wry smile. And you have all the time in the world. Let them think they've won. Let them get comfortable. And when the moment is right, we'll show them exactly who Elena Montgomery really is. I hadn't expected that moment to come quite like this. I hadn't expected Victoria to be reborn with memories of a past life. But as I walked out of Grandmother Chen's study, leaving my sister to her imagined victory, I felt a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. Victoria thought she'd beaten me by stealing the inheritance. She had no idea that the Montgomery fortune made Grandmother Chen's estate look like pocket change. She had no idea that while she'd been scheming to steal a few $1,000,000, I'd been learning to manage billions. She had no idea that the game had changed entirely, and I was going to enjoy teaching her that. The call from Catherine came 2 hours after I left Grandmother Chen's house. "James had our lawyers look into those documents Victoria filed," she said without preamble. "The forgeries are quite good, but they're still forgeries. Your grandmother's signature was traced, and the witness statements are fabricated. We could have the whole thing thrown out with a single phone call." I sat in my real apartment, the penthouse my father had bought me, the one the Chens didn't know existed, and looked out at the city lights. "Don't," I said. "Elena, let her have it," I said quietly. "Let her think she's won. Grandmother Chen has, what, maybe $3 million in assets total? The house, the stocks, some jewelry?" "About that, yes." "Then let Victoria take it. Let her believe she's successfully rewritten her past. Because when we reveal the truth about who I really am, when she realizes I've been a Montgomery all along, the look on her face will be worth so much more than $3 million. Catherine was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed, a sharp, delighted sound. "You know what? You're absolutely right. James always said you had his head for strategy." "Very well, we'll let this play out. But, Elena, we need to accelerate our timeline. Your grandmother is dying, in 2 weeks according to the doctors." My heart clenched. Despite everything, I'd loved my grandmother once, before Victoria had become the favorite, before I'd become the disappointment. "I want to say goodbye," I said. "Properly, before the end." "Of course," Catherine said gently. "And perhaps it's time we began laying the groundwork for the reveal. Your father has a gala next week, the Montgomery Global Annual Charity Ball. It's the biggest social event of the season. Every influential family in the city will be there, including the Chens." Victoria and her husband received an invitation. "You want me to go public?" "Not entirely, but I think it's time we started introducing you as James Montgomery's daughter to our inner circle. Plant some seeds, let the rumors start to spread. By the time your grandmother passes and Victoria tries to claim her victory, the truth will already be an open secret among everyone who matters." I smiled, dark and satisfied. "That's perfect." "There's one more thing," Catherine said. "We've been investigating Victoria, trying to understand this change in her behavior. And Elena, there's no easy way to say this, but we found something." My hand tightened on the phone. "What?" "Records from a private psychiatric facility. Victoria was institutionalized 3 years ago in what we can only assume was her past life. She'd had a complete breakdown after you, the past life you, inherited everything. According to the records, she became obsessed with the idea that she'd been reborn, that she was living in a second chance timeline. She was hospitalized for severe delusional disorder." The room felt cold suddenly. "Are you saying she actually believes she's been reborn, that she's not just mentally ill?" "I'm saying we don't know," Catherine said carefully. "Either she's experiencing a genuine delusion that happens to involve you inheriting in a past life, or something impossible has happened, and she really was reborn. Either way, she's dangerous. She's obsessed with taking what she thinks you stole from her, and she won't stop at the inheritance." "What do you mean?" "In her past life, according to the psychiatric records, you died 6 months after receiving the inheritance. Car accident. Victoria was convinced you were murdered, that someone in the family had arranged it. She became paranoid, reclusive. That's when she had her breakdown." My blood ran cold. "You think she's planning to kill me?" "I think she's planning something," Catherine said, "and I think we need to be ready. which is why the gala is perfect. Once you're publicly established as a Montgomery, you're protected. No one would dare touch you. But until then, Elena, you need to be careful. The next 7 days passed in a blur of preparation. I spent my mornings at Montgomery Global, learning the last-minute details of several major deals my father was closing. I spent my afternoons being fitted for gala gowns by designers whose names I'd only seen in magazines. And I spent my evenings at the Chen house playing the role of the overlooked granddaughter one last time. Victoria was different now, more confident but also more watchful. She'd caught me looking at her oddly a few times, and there was a calculation in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "You're taking this well," she said to me on the third day, cornering me in Grandmother Chen's kitchen while the rest of the family was in the dining room. "Taking what well?" "Losing everything." Her smile was sharp. "I expected you to fight harder, to make a scene." I shrugged, reaching for a glass of water. "What's the point? Grandmother made her choice. You're clearly the favorite. You always have been." "That's true," Victoria said, but her eyes were narrow, suspicious. "But you're still here. Why?" "Where else would I go?" I said quietly, letting a hint of defeat color my voice. "This is my family. Even if I'm not wanted, I don't have anywhere else." Something flickered in Victoria's expression. Triumph mixed with... Was that guilt? "You could have had everything," she said suddenly. "In another life, you did have everything, and you wasted it, Elena. You didn't appreciate it. You didn't deserve it." I went very still. "What are you talking about?" She laughed, but it sounded brittle. "Nothing. Just thinking about how things could have been different. How they were different, in a way." She leaned closer and her voice dropped. "Do you ever feel like you're living the wrong life? Like there's another version of you out there who made different choices?" It was a test. She was trying to figure out if I knew. If I'd somehow been reborn too. "All the time," I said honestly. "I think about it every day. What I could have been if things had been different." Victoria studied my face for a long moment. Then she nodded, apparently satisfied. "Well," she said, straightening up, "at least you're self-aware." "That's more than I expected." "Oh, and Elena, you should come to the Montgomery Charity Gala this weekend." My heart skipped. "What?" "The Montgomery Global Gala. Marcus and I are going. He does business with them. It's a huge event, very exclusive. But I can get you in as my +1. It'll be good for you to see what real success looks like. Maybe it'll motivate you to get your life together." The irony was so perfect, I almost laughed. "That's generous of you," I managed. "I know, Belle," Victoria said. "I'm trying to be a better sister. After all, you're all I have left." Her expression softened, and for just a moment I saw genuine emotion there. "When Grandmother dies, it'll just be you and me. I want us to have a better relationship. Even if you're not... Even if things are different now." She left before I could respond, but her words echoed in my mind. "When Grandmother dies, it'll just be you and me." In her past life, she'd lost me 6 months after that. Was she planning to make sure that didn't happen again? Or was this remorse a desire to change things? I texted Catherine. "Victoria invited me to the gala. She doesn't know I was already planning to attend. What do I do?" The response came immediately. "Accept. Let her think she's bringing you into that world. The shock will be even better when she realizes you've been there all along." I accepted Victoria's invitation the next day, playing the role of grateful younger sister perfectly. She seemed pleased, almost magnanimous in her victory. Grandmother Chen died 3 days before the gala. I was there, holding her hand when it happened. Victoria had left to take a phone call, some business matter that couldn't wait, she'd said. It was just me and Grandmother in the hospice room, the machines beeping steadily. "Elena," Grandmother whispered. Her eyes were clearer than they'd been in days. "I'm here, Grandmother. I'm sorry." Her grip on my hand tightened weakly. I was wrong. About you. About Victoria. I saw it near the end. The way she looked at you. The way she lied so easily. I tried to change the will back, but it's okay, I said, and I meant it. The Montgomery fortune meant I didn't need her inheritance. But more than that, I'd learned that forgiveness was lighter than anger. I forgive you, grandmother. Rest now. She smiled, tears slipping down her withered cheeks. You were always the kind one. I should have seen it sooner. I should have. Her voice trailed off. She died 30 seconds later, her hand going slack in mine. I sat there for a long moment, feeling the weight of everything we'd never said, all the time we'd wasted. When Victoria returned, she took one look at the flatlined monitors and burst into tears. But through her sobs, I caught a glimpse of her expression when she thought I wasn't looking. Relief. She was relieved that grandmother was dead before she could change the will back. The Montgomery Global Charity Gala was held at the Grand Imperial Hotel in a ballroom that dripped crystal chandeliers and old money. I arrived early, dressed in a gown that had cost more than Victoria's wedding dress, midnight blue silk that hugged my curves and trailed behind me like liquid starlight. My hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, and the diamonds at my throat and ears were family heirlooms from the Montgomery vault. I looked like I belonged, because I did. My father found me in one of the private rooms before the event began. He pulled me into a tight hug. Are you ready for this? He asked. I am. Your grandmother Catherine has already started spreading the word to our closest associates. By the time Victoria and her husband arrive, half the room will know that James Montgomery's long-lost daughter has been found. The other half will find out over the course of the evening. And the Chens? Are expected at 8 o'clock. You'll be introduced as my daughter during my opening speech at 8:30. His smile was grim. They'll have just enough time to get comfortable before their entire world turns upside down. I took a deep breath. Father, there's something you should know. I think Victoria might be planning to hurt me. After what happened in her past life, if she really was reborn, she might see me as a threat. James's expression darkened. Security is already aware. There will be guards around you at all times, though they'll be discreet. And Elena, after tonight, you'll be untouchable. The whole world will know you're a Montgomery. She won't dare. The ballroom doors opened at 7:30 and guests began to arrive. I stood with my father and Catherine at the entrance to the main hall, greeting people. Each introduction was the same. May I present my daughter, Elena Montgomery? The reactions were spectacular. Shock, curiosity, calculation as people reassessed their social hierarchies. The Montgomery heir had been a mystery for years. James had never remarried after my mother, never had other children. The question of succession had been a constant topic of speculation among the city's elite. Now they had their answer. At 8 o'clock, Victoria swept in on her husband's arm. She was wearing an emerald gown that probably cost a fortune, dripping in the jewelry she'd inherited from grandmother Chen. Her head was high, her smile confident. She looked like a woman who'd won. I watched from across the ballroom as she worked the room, schmoozing with executives and socialites. She hadn't seen me yet. I was standing near the far wall, partially hidden by a marble column, observing. Marcus Chen was talking to one of Montgomery Global's board members, laughing at some joke. Victoria was scanning the crowd, probably looking for me. She told me to meet her at the main entrance at 8:15. It was 8:20 now. I watched her pull out her phone, frowning. She typed something, probably a text to me. My phone buzzed in my clutch, but I didn't check it. Instead, I stepped out from behind the column and began walking toward the central platform where my father was preparing to give his speech. I moved through the crowd and people turned to watch. Conversations paused. I heard whispers, "That's her." James Montgomery's daughter. I heard she's been lost for years. She's beautiful. She'll inherit everything. I reached the platform just as my father took the microphone. His eyes met mine and he smiled, warm and proud and full of love. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice carrying across the ballroom. Thank you all for joining us this evening for the Montgomery Global Annual Charity Gala. As always, we're honored to have your support for the causes that matter most to our organization. I glanced across the room and saw Victoria. She'd finally spotted me. Her expression was confused. Why was I standing next to James Montgomery? Why was everyone looking at me? This year is special for Montgomery Global, my father continued. For many of you know that for 22 years I believed my daughter had died. It was the greatest tragedy of my life, a wound that never healed. Victoria's face had gone white. She was staring at me now, really staring, as if seeing me for the first time. But 6 months ago, I learned the truth. My daughter was alive. She'd been living in our very city, lost to me through cruel deception, but alive. And now, tonight, I want to introduce her to all of you, to welcome her home, publicly and officially. He held out his hand to me and I took it, stepping up onto the platform beside him. This is my daughter, Elena Montgomery, my heir, my pride and joy, and from this moment forward, she will be taking an active role in Montgomery Global as Vice President of Strategic Development. The applause was thunderous. Camera flashes went off. I stood there, my hand in my father's, and looked directly at Victoria. Her face had gone from white to red to a sickly gray-green. She was shaking her head slowly, her mouth moving but no sound coming out. Marcus was staring between me and his business partners, clearly trying to figure out what was happening. I smiled at my sister, a cold, victorious smile, because this was the moment she realized. This was the moment she understood that while she'd been focused on stealing grandmother's inheritance, I'd already ascended to a completely different level. This was the moment her rebirth, her second chance, her carefully laid plans all crumbled to dust. The crowd surged forward to congratulate me and my father. Victoria was swept away in the crush of bodies, and when I looked for her again, she was gone. I found her in the bathroom 20 minutes later. She was leaning over one of the marble sinks, her hands gripping the edge so tightly her knuckles were white. Her face in the mirror was a mask of devastation. "Hello, Victoria," I said quietly. She spun around and I saw tears streaming down her face. "How?" she whispered. "How did you do this? You weren't... In my past life, you never..." "Never what? Never had a father who loved me? Never escaped the Chens?" I moved closer, my voice soft but relentless. "Tell me, Victoria, in your past life, when did I inherit grandmother's money?" 2 years from now," she said brokenly. "After you'd gotten married, settled down, after I'd already wasted so much of my life being jealous of you. And then you got everything, and I had nothing, and I couldn't stand it. I became obsessed. I told everyone you'd been murdered, that it wasn't an accident, but no one believed me. They said I was crazy. They locked me up. And then you died," I said, "and woke up 3 years in the past with a chance to change everything." "How do you know?" she demanded. Are you reborn too?" "No," I said. "I just paid attention. You were different. Too confident, too strategic. Like you'd done this before." I paused. "And you confirmed it just now." Her face crumpled. "It doesn't matter. You've already won. You were already a Montgomery before I even came back. Before I even tried to change things." "How?" 6 months ago, my real grandmother found me," I said. "She told me who I really was, who my father was. And I finally escaped the Chens." I moved closer, my voice dropping. "But here's the thing, Victoria. I didn't have to be reborn to beat you. I just had to be found. I just had to be given the smallest chance, the slightest bit of support and love. That's all it took." "I never meant..." she started, then stopped. "In my past life, I was going to apologize. After everything fell apart, I realized I'd been horrible to you. I wanted to make amends. But you died before I could. I thought if I came back, If I could just get the inheritance this time, I could finally be happy. Finally prove I was good enough. By stealing from me again? I asked. By forging documents and manipulating a dying woman? I didn't. I wasn't. She covered her face with her hands. I just wanted to win, just once. You have no idea what it was like being the favorite, but knowing I was never good enough. Knowing grandmother only loved me because I achieved things, not because of who I was. You were the pastasan, one she actually loved, Elena. Before you failed, before you disappointed her, she loved you for you. I had to earn every scrap of affection. So you made sure I failed, I said quietly. You sabotaged me at every turn, made sure I never had the chance to succeed. Yes, she whispered, and I thought if I came back, if I could do it differently, I could take what you had and finally be free. But you'd already left. You'd already become someone I could never touch. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, at the designer dress and expensive jewelry bought with our grandmother's money, at the tears and the desperate, hollow look in her eyes. You're right, I said softly. You can never touch me now. I'm a Montgomery. I'm protected, I'm powerful, and I'm loved for exactly who I am, not for what I achieve. So what happens now? She asked, bitterly. You ruin me? You expose the forged documents? You destroy my marriage, my reputation, my life? I considered her question. Catherine had already prepared the legal documents. One phone call and Victoria would be facing fraud charges. Her marriage to Marcus would crumble when he realized what she'd done. The Chens would be disgraced. It would be so easy. But as I looked at my sister, this woman who'd been given a miraculous second chance and had used it to make the same mistakes, I felt something unexpected. Pity. I'm going to give you a choice, I said finally. You can keep the inheritance. Keep grandmother's house and stocks and jewelry. I'll have my lawyers verify that you believed you were acting in good faith, that you were following what you thought were grandmother's wishes. It won't be easy to explain, but it can be done. You'll keep everything you stole. Victoria's head snapped up. What? On one condition, I continued. You get help. Real psychiatric help. You find someone who can work with you on processing this rebirth, whether it was real or delusional. You stop trying to compete with me. You accept that we're different people with different paths, and you never, ever try to sabotage me again. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this? Because you're my sister, I said simply. And because I've learned that revenge is empty, justice, mercy, moving forward, those things actually matter. I moved toward the door, then paused. And also because grandmother's $3 million is nothing compared to the Montgomery fortune. You won, Victoria. You successfully rewrote history and stole the Chen inheritance. Congratulations. I hope it makes you happy. I left her there, crying silently in the bathroom. The next few months passed in a whirlwind of activity. The story of James Montgomery's long-lost daughter captivated the city's social scene. There were interviews, photo shoots, charity events. I was introduced to every important family, every influential CEO, every politician who mattered. I also threw myself into work at Montgomery Global. My father had meant it when he made me vice president. I had real responsibilities, real power, and I discovered that I was good at it. Better than good. I had an instinct for strategic development, for seeing opportunities where others saw risk. Within 2 months, I'd closed a deal that brought in $100 million in revenue. Within 3, I'd identified and acquired a promising tech startup that would become one of our most valuable assets. My father watched me with pride that made my heart ache with happiness. You're a natural, he said one evening over dinner at the estate. Better than I was at your age. Victoria kept her distance. She'd checked herself into a private psychiatric facility for a month of intensive treatment. When she emerged, she was quieter, more subdued. She sent me a letter, not an email, but an actual handwritten letter. Dear Elena. It read, I'm trying to understand what happened to me. whether I really was reborn or whether I experienced a psychotic break so severe I believed I'd lived another life. The doctors say it doesn't matter which is true, the healing process is the same. I need to accept that I can't change the past, whether that past is one life or two. I need to stop trying to compete with you, to beat you, to prove I'm better. Because the truth is, we're both exactly who we're supposed to be. I'm sorry for everything I did. In both lives, apparently. I hope someday you can forgive me. But if not, I understand. Victoria, I folded the letter carefully and put it in my desk drawer. Forgiveness would come, maybe, but it would take time. The Chen family tried to reconnect with me once the news spread that I was a Montgomery. Suddenly, Grandfather Chen, who I'd met maybe 5 times in my entire life, wanted to have lunch. Distant aunts and uncles called, asking about investment opportunities. Even Father Chen reached out, suggesting we rebuild our relationship. I politely declined every overture. The Chens had shown me who they were. I believed them. 6 months after the gala, I was featured on the cover of Forbes magazine. Elena Montgomery, the heiress who earned her place. The article detailed my rise at Montgomery Global, my strategic acquisitions, my vision for the company's future. There was a single paragraph about my past. Montgomery spent her childhood separated from her father due to a family tragedy. She credits her years of hardship with giving her the empathy and drive that now fuel her success. I didn't mention the Chens. I didn't mention Victoria's betrayal. I didn't need to. The article went viral. I became something of a sensation, the lost heiress who'd proven herself through merit. Harvard Business School invited me to give a lecture. 3 different charities asked me to join their boards. My social media following exploded into the millions. And through it all, Victoria watched from the sidelines. She and Marcus were still married, though rumor had it they were having problems. She'd sold grandmother's house and was living in a modest apartment, seeing her therapist twice a week. She'd started a small online business selling vintage clothing. It was humble, quiet, so different from the life she'd imagined, either in this life or her past one. 1 year after the gala, I received a wedding invitation. Not Victoria's, she was already married. This was from Marcus's younger brother David, who was marrying his longtime girlfriend. Victoria would be there, of course. I debated not going, but Catherine convinced me. "You can't avoid your sister forever," she said gently. "And besides, you have nothing to fear from her now. You've built a life that's completely separate from the Chens. You're successful in your own right. What can she possibly do to you?" So I went. The wedding was at a country club, nice but not extravagant. I arrived alone, dressed in a simple but elegant cocktail dress. I'd learned that when you were a Montgomery, you didn't need to show off. Your name did it for you. Victoria saw me as soon as I walked in. She was standing by the bar wearing a dress I recognized from her online shop's inventory. She froze, her glass halfway to her lips. I walked over slowly. "Hello, Victoria." "Elena." Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands shaking slightly. "I didn't think you'd come." "David was always kind to me," I said. "Back when I was dating Marcus's cousin, remember? He's one of the few Chens who treated me like a person." She flinched at that. "I remember." We stood in awkward silence for a moment. Then Victoria said, "You look happy. In the magazines and the interviews. You look genuinely happy." "I am," I said simply. "I'm glad." She took a sip of her drink. "I mean it. I'm glad one of us gets to be happy." "You could be happy too," I said, "if you stopped measuring your life against everyone else's." "I'm trying," she said quietly. "The therapy helps. I'm learning to accept that I'll never be a CEO or an heiress or a social media sensation. I'm just Victoria, running a small business, trying to fix my marriage, going to therapy. It's not exciting, but it's real." I looked at my sister and saw, perhaps for the first time, a real person instead of an antagonist. Someone who'd been broken by expectations and competition and her own ambition. Someone who'd been given a miraculous second chance and had squandered it on the same petty jealousies. But someone who was trying, finally, to change. "I think that's brave," I said. "Building a real life instead of a fantasy one." Her eyes widened. Really? Really? I paused, then added, Victoria, I forgive you for all of it. The sabotage, the inheritance theft, everything. I forgive you. She started crying right there at the bar, silent tears streaming down her face. Thank you, she whispered. You don't know what that means to me. I do, actually, I said, because I know what it means to be forgiven. My father forgave me for every imagined slight, every year we lost. Grandmother Catherine forgave my mother for keeping me from them, and that forgiveness freed me to become who I am now. I touched her shoulder gently. So I forgive you. And I hope you can forgive yourself. 2 years after the gala, Montgomery Global announced its largest acquisition to date, a merger with Chen Technologies that would create one of the most powerful conglomerates in the country. Marcus Chen stepped down as CEO, taking a generous buyout package. In his place, James Montgomery appointed a new leadership team. And, as Vice President of Strategic Development, I oversaw the entire integration process. It was poetic in a way. The Chen company that had once been so far above me, so untouchable, was now a subsidiary of my father's empire. The family that had treated me like garbage now answered to me. I could have been cruel about it, could have made Marcus's departure humiliating, could have fired every Chen who worked at the company, but I didn't. I kept Marcus on as a senior consultant. I promoted several talented Chen employees who'd been overlooked by the old leadership. I made the merger as smooth and professional as possible because I'd learned that true power wasn't about revenge. It was about building something better. Victoria called me the day the merger was announced. I saw the news, she said. You own Marcus's company now. The company belongs to Montgomery Global, I corrected. I just helped facilitate the acquisition. Elena, her voice was thick with emotion. In my past life, Marcus's company went bankrupt. He lost everything. I blamed you for it, thought you'd somehow cursed our family, but you didn't, did you? You saved him. You kept his company alive by absorbing it into yours. I saved 2,000 jobs, I said. Marcus just happened to benefit. She laughed, but it sounded broken. You're a better person than I ever gave you credit for, in both lives. After we hung up, I sat in my office, the corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and thought about how far I'd come. 2 years ago, I'd been working in a cramped antique shop, barely making rent, convinced I was a failure. Now I was a Montgomery. I was powerful, successful, respected. I had a father who loved me, a grandmother who doted on me, a future that stretched out bright and limitless. Victoria had been reborn with all the advantages of foreknowledge, all the benefits of a second chance. But I'd been reborn too, in my own way. Reborn into the life I was always meant to have, into the family that had been searching for me all along. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. Not revenge, not humiliation, not even justice. Just being found, being loved, being free to become exactly who I was meant to be. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. Family dinner tonight? Catherine is making her famous lasagna. I smiled and typed, back when I'll be there. 5 years after the gala, I stood in the same ballroom where everything had changed. It was the Montgomery Global Annual Charity Gala again, but this time I was the one giving the speech. My father had retired, passing the CEO position to me 6 months earlier. At 30 years old, I was one of the youngest Fortune 500 CEOs in the country. The ballroom was packed. Every seat filled. I could see Victoria in the crowd, sitting with Marcus. They'd managed to save their marriage somehow. She looked peaceful in a way I'd never seen before. I could see the Chen family at a table in the back, distant, irrelevant, but not excluded. I'd learned that grace was more powerful than grudges. I could see my father and Catherine at the head table looking at me with pride and love that still made my throat tight. 5 years ago, I began, my voice carrying across the ballroom, I stood on this stage as James Montgomery's newly found daughter. I was overwhelmed, uncertain, afraid of what the future would hold, but I was also hopeful because I'd finally found where I belonged. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Tonight, I'm standing here as the CEO of Montgomery Global, And I'm still that same person. Still hopeful, still grateful, still overwhelmed by the opportunities I've been given. But I've learned something important in these 5 years, something I want to share with all of you. I took a breath. I've learned that the circumstances of your birth don't determine your value. I've learned that being lost doesn't mean you can't be found. I've learned that the family you're born into might not be the family that saves you. And I've learned that second chances don't come from magic or rebirth or some cosmic do-over. They come from people who see your potential and decide to invest in it. From people who love you not for what you achieve, but for who you are. My eyes found Victoria's. She was crying, I realized, but smiling too. So tonight, as we gather to support the causes that matter to Montgomery Global, I want us to remember that every donation we make, every scholarship we fund, every opportunity we create, those are second chances for someone. Those are the moments where lost children get found, where potential gets realized, where lives get changed. The applause started before I'd finished, building into a standing ovation. I stood there, taking it in, feeling the weight and responsibility and incredible privilege of everything I'd been given. Later, after the speeches and the dinner and the dancing, I found Victoria on the terrace. She was standing at the railing, looking out at the city lights. "That was a beautiful speech," she said without turning around. "Thank you." I moved to stand beside her. "How are you doing?" "Better," she said. "Really better. The therapy helped. Learning to let go of the competition, the jealousy, the need to win. I have a good life now, Elena. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. And that's enough. I'm glad." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Victoria said, "I need to tell you something about my past life, about why you died." My heart stuttered. "What?" "I didn't kill you," she said quickly. I want you to know that, but I could have saved you. You called me that night after your brakes failed. You were terrified, said your car wasn't stopping. You begged me to call the police to send help. And her voice broke. "I thought you were being dramatic. I hung up on you. By the time I realized you were serious, by the time I called 911, it was too late. You'd crashed." She turned to face me, tears streaming down her face. "That's why I was so convinced you'd been murdered. Because I couldn't accept that I'd let you die through my own pettiness. It was easier to believe it was a conspiracy than to admit I'd failed you in the most important moment. And when I was reborn, I told myself I'd fix it. I'd take the inheritance, yes, but I'd also protect you. I'd make sure that accident never happened. But by the time I came back, you were already gone. Already saved by your real family. You didn't need my protection. You never did." I stared at my sister, processing this confession. In another life, she'd let me die. And in this one, she'd planned to steal from me. But she'd also tried, in her broken way, to make amends. "Victoria," I said quietly, "in that life, I'm sure I made mistakes too. I'm sure I hurt you, even if I didn't mean to. We were trapped in a toxic family system that pitted us against each other, but we're not in that life anymore. We're here. Now. And we get to choose who we want to be to each other." "Who do you want me to be?" she asked. I thought about it. About all the years of rivalry and pain. About the two paths our lives had taken, her rebirth, my rescue. About how differently the same story could unfold. "My sister," I said finally. "Just my sister. Not my rival, not my enemy, just family." She pulled me into a hug, and I let her. We stood there on the terrace, two women who'd been given second chances in completely different ways, both trying to figure out how to be better than we'd been. "Thank you," she whispered, "for forgiving me, for saving Marcus's company, for not destroying me when you had every right to." "Thank you for learning to let go," I said, "for getting help, for trying to change." We pulled apart, and Victoria wiped her eyes. "I should get back to Marcus, but Elena, I'm proud of you. I mean it. You're an incredible CEO, an incredible person." "You're not so bad yourself," I said with a small smile. She laughed, shook her head, and went back inside. I stayed on the terrace a while longer, looking out at the city that had once seemed so cold and unforgiving, but had become my home. I thought about the girl I'd been 5 years ago, lost, broke, convinced she was worthless. And the woman I'd become, powerful, successful, loved. My phone buzzed. Another text from my father. "Come back inside, kiddo. Your grandmother wants to toast your success." I smiled, tucked my phone away, and headed back to the ballroom. Back to my family, my real family, back to the life I'd been reborn into without even dying. And as I walked through those golden doors, surrounded by love and support and opportunity, I realized that Victoria had been wrong about one thing. She'd thought Rebirth would give her a second chance, that knowing the future would let her win, but real second chances didn't come from living life twice. They came from being found by people who saw your worth and decided to invest in it. They came from escape and rescue and the courage to accept that you deserved better. They came from becoming exactly who you were always meant to be. And in the end, I didn't need foreknowledge to triumph. I just needed to be Elena Montgomery. That was always enough.